it's not long until I'm scrolling through my LinkedIn feed that I find out that SEO is dead. To my surprise,
Again, SEO is yet again evolving. The principles in SEO remain also in AI search. You need to also allow AI crawlers to access to crawl your content. The validation that you need to take action on your hosting or your CDN is a little bit different because the user agents are different as well. The ability for Google to index our content, they are very sophisticated at it, and they render JavaScript with challenges, of course, when this is done at scale and depending on the scenario. But the reality is that AI crawlers don't do it at all. So if you rely on client-side render JavaScript for critical content or navigation and so on, well, this is information that AI crawlers won't see.
What's up, everyone? Today we had the honor of sitting down with Aleyda Soli, international SEO consultant. In this episode, we tackle crawlability requirements for AI search engines, why LLMs are just a new search channel, not a new function, AI search visibility analysis for SEO teams, why LLM search rewards brands with real community signals, and how topic-level analysis shapes AI search strategy. All that and a bunch more stuff after a quick word from two of our awesome partners.
This episode is brought to you by Revenue Hero.
2 field forms. Complete context, instant scheduling. Finally, you get to pick all 3 without a single line of code. Introducing native enrichment by Revenue Hero. Plug in Clearbit, Crust Data, Apollo, or stack all 3. Enrich all the data you need instantly on submit. Stack your enrichment providers, waterfall your way to clarity. Determine qualification and meeting routing based on enriched information. Layer it onto your current distribution logic. Book more meetings with your qualified buyers. Get started at revenuehero.io.
This episode is brought to you by Mammoth Growth. Ever feel like your data is lying to you? Like you're making big bets on numbers you don't even trust? Everyone talks about garbage in, garbage out, but almost no one actually fixes the garbage. That's where Mammoth Growth comes in. They're the fastest AI-powered data team on the planet. They build production-ready data architecture that turns your fragmented customer data into one unified, trustworthy source of truth, fast. Most companies spend months trying to get answers. Mammoth Growth compresses weeks of analytics engineering into minutes using a multi-agent AI workflow. No rework, no broken dashboards, just clean, reliable data models you can act on with confidence. Calendly, Siemens, TED, and hundreds of other brands trust Mammoth Growth to fuel measurable growth. Check them out at mammothgrowth.com to see how they make bad data disappear. Aleyda, thank you so much for your time today. Really excited to chat.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. It has been a little bit crazy for me lately with so many in-person events. So it's even refreshing to be able to speak with you online like this. A little bit different, more laid back as well.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah. I saw all the posts on LinkedIn about your frequent traveling right now. I think it's conference season for a lot of folks. But yeah, it's not every day that we have an SEO powerhouse like yourself on the podcast. We were joined by Mike King in the early days of the podcast, but I've actually invited my old co-founder and co-host today to help me with this episode. He's super deep in the SEO space, and I feel like the conversation will be on a different bar with him. So Mr. John Taylor, thank you so much for your time. Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for welcoming me back. I hope you enjoy all the artwork behind me, as this is what I've been doing the last year, is trying to become an artist.
Is there some kids artwork in there too? I've got the Riverside recording here, so it's all blurry, but the folks on YouTube will get to see the beauty.
Yeah, beautiful art, all printed Mid-Journey coloring books. This is the vibe these days, guys. AI for everything.
Very cool. All right, let's get into it, Aleyda. The first question I wanted to ask you is this idea that you've echoed the sentiment that good SEO is good GEO. You're basically implying that like fundamentals of SEO carry over to AI search, but you've also talked about how whether that's enough depends on how well you're already addressing AI search behaviors versus your competitors. Which core SEO practices do you think remain critical for success in this like AI-driven search results that we deal with today?
Yes, indeed. And thank you for bringing that up. I think that is the hot topic right now in the search world, indeed, and in digital marketing as well. I can say that the principles in SEO remain also in AI search, remain valid and very, very relevant from a crawlability standpoint, you need to also allow AI crawlers to crawl your content, your information. The thing is, the rules that you might want to set might be different depending on your own context as well, right? The validation that you need to also do and take action on your hosting or your CDN is a little bit different because the user agents are different as well. So maybe you have allowed traditional search engine scrollers to access your content, but you're unknowingly blocking AI crawlers. So it's an extra step that you need to do. But yes, crawlability remains important. Indexability as well. We love in SEO to complain about the ability for Google to index our content, but the reality is that they are very sophisticated at this point because of all of the years of experience, and they render JavaScript with challenges, of course, when this is done at scale and depending on the scenario, the speed or how long does it take to render your content that relies on JavaScript and so on. But the reality is that AI crawlers don't do it at all. So if you rely on client-side render JavaScript for critical content or navigation and so on, well, this is information that AI crawlers won't see, right? And then you mentioned different search behaviors, right? It was this OpenAI research that was finally published, I believe, a month ago or so, that I was so very happy with, because this was something that many independent platforms, third-party tools were already sharing about this new intents that had to do with creating task-oriented type of actions that didn't existed with traditional search and might or might not necessarily be relevant to address or to target, right? From a marketing standpoint, but that definitely different behaviors, right? And also the role of citations and mentions in popularity as a signal of authority, right? If you were doing sophisticated enough SEO at this point, if you had a mature program, you were very likely already aligned with your digital PR and community management activities and efforts, and very likely were already making the most out of it. But very likely you also were very focused on getting backlinks, getting links from external sources, from relevant, highly authoritative, etc. But very likely you were focused much more on links than on mentions, right? Like the shift and the weight and the importance that mentions have now changed. And then finally, because of the difference and shift in interface as well of what we can expect and the outcome of the behavior of the user within the platform, traditional search has been considered and treated historically as a performance channel, right? And this is what we were always look into and what we care about in terms of KPIs and goals, right? Rankings, clicks, traffic, conversions, right? Very like that. And there were already, let's say, challenges in attribution that we can all agree, but it was very performance focused. Now it will be very myopic to treat AI search and LLMs like that, right? There's a layer there of branding and to consider it as a branding channel as well, and the inclusion, the visibility, the share of voice, the sentiment of the inclusion of the mention, even if it doesn't carry a link and it doesn't refer direct traffic or a user to your site right away. It plays a role within the purchasing journey and as a marketing channel that should be accounted for and should be monitored and addressed and taken into account and so on, right? So as you can see, like that, quite a few differences in different areas and principles and the pillars of search. And how much does it change from what you were already doing? So it depends on your context, what the level of maturity that you already had, the level of sophistication, how much you have in the backlog or you had in the backlog in the past, and also your own vertical, your own audience, right? And depending on and the level of visibility and that you already have versus competitors, etc., etc. So it depends a lot on the context. And unfortunately, especially in SEO, we have the challenge that I believe that we always love to say it depends, and then we share a lot of the context factors and criteria and so on. And sadly, decision makers many times, C-level, they don't like that complexity, right? And they expect the very straightforward answer. And it's challenging to communicate that and to clarify all that. But hopefully, little by little, especially once that we have access to more data, to more insights, more research, like the ones that are being published now more and more, it will get easier, let's say, to align it and to tie it in order to make the most out of it, and eliminating all of this noise as well.
I think your take is spot on, and a fascinating illumination of how we're seeing the space evolve, right? What you've described, I think, is the key differences between SEO and geo. But I think also you described the tools and processes that SEOs today are going to use to solve the problems of geo tomorrow, right? Like an SEO is going to understand how to talk about, hey, should we move to server-side rendering? This could make a lot of sense for indexing. Are we able to make sure that all the bots are crawling our site cleanly? So working with these teams, I feel personally that the SEO mandate gets expanded by the geo versus it's like a brand new field. One of the things that I don't go online often anymore, as Phil knows. I'm not on social media a ton, but when I do sign into social media, it's not long until I'm scrolling through my LinkedIn feed that I find out that SEO is dead. To my surprise,
again,
being an active consultant, I'm like, oh, it's dead? Dang, I should have switched gears a long time ago. But what you described as well also kind of encapsulates what I see when I'm working with clients is a great confusion around what is geo, where does it fit in the roadmap. I think SEOs are struggling still to articulate how it's the same and how it's different. One of the ways that I've been meditating on this is thinking about LLMs as actually just a new channel within a broader medium, right? You have Google search with the side of Bing and Yahoo, but now you have LLMs. This is like TikTok to our YouTube. What do you think about that? How do we communicate this to the stakeholders in our organization? Is this a new channel within the same
100%. I love that take, and I completely agree. And you know what? It's funny, and it's a little bit ironic because in SEO we have, in the Western world, we have traditionally complained about the role of Google as the big monopoly. Well, there are even trials and so on, right? Because of that in the US. But yes, because of everybody uses Google. So for some people, SEO is a synonym of Google focus optimization, organic optimization for their SERPs, and their SERPs are in certain format and so on, right? So once that the SERPs start to shift and diversify a little bit in different formats that don't necessarily comply with what they expected, and then other competitors of the platform start also taking part and have a role into these new interfaces and ways of platforms to search, then all of a sudden the reaction, rather than saying like SEO is evolving, they need to take into account these additional platforms that are also now used to search, to look, to discover information, to consume information that might or might not be commercial, but there might be again a mix of informational, commercial, transactional, and so on, and might be useful for my clients and companies to attract potential customers from. And rather than saying, yes, it's evolving, it's like, oh, it's dying, because they connect, unfortunately, because of the position in the market that Google has historically had in the Western world. However, we can also say that for quite a few industries, and depending on who your target market is, that was already sort of diversified. So, for example, if you were targeting like younger generations, like TikTok, for example, or Instagram, depending on which retailer, whatever. And you also, and I have clients that are in the retail space that also ask me for information like, what are the best practices from a searchability standpoint that we should start integrating and taking into account to maximize the visibility besides the ads, right? So I think that finally we have gotten into that space in which there won't be necessarily a single platform anymore, or at least in the next few years when everybody starts shifting a little bit in their behavior and adopting these new channels. Let's see, maybe it's not only Google anymore, but Google and ChatGPT and Perplexity, and there are 3 big platforms, etc., etc. But yes, this should be, I agree, the vision that SEO is yet again evolving as it always has, and now it doesn't need to account only for a single platform and way to do things and or search paradigm and a single search format, but different channels, because now the behavior is more split and diversified. Interesting enough, I was a couple of months ago at this event in Shenzhen in China, and it blew my mind how Baidu there doesn't have nowhere the weight than as Google in the Western world. They acknowledge also the challenges that Baidu has, providing honest, accurate, balanced answers in many fields. So they use a variety of platforms to gather information. So if you really want to maximize your organic reach, let's say in China, they will say, okay, yes, optimize for Baidu, but yes, maybe you should also use RedNote. That is their Instagram-like app that they use there to post everything, and very focusing commercial-oriented products and services as well, and also go for TikTok. And so I think that because of this, they are much more used to diversifying and having presence across all of this. And I believe that this will happen also more and more in the Western world. And when we finally realize that SEO is not only for Google, well, we will be much more used, I guess, to stop saying that it's dead and just making sure that we optimize for whatever platform it is now used by the audience, and shift, let's say, the principles and priorities and factors that we optimize for depending on what's taken into account in those particular platforms that are actually useful and relevant for our audience.
It's fascinating. The SEO space itself is so opaque, right? When we're looking at a single provider like Google. I remember years ago, you mentioned lawsuits, but I remember breathlessly sitting on a Twitter thread where Rand Fishkin was watching a US congressional hearing to kind of understand and deconstruct how Google was ranking things. And I know last year there was this big leak that came out. It's fascinating. And from my perspective, I find it actually somewhat liberating to be able to elevate some of the principles of SEO to general principles. I'm curious, I think, coming back to the idea of how do SEO and geo mesh together, I think there are, again, sometimes on social media, I see this, hey, we should have a separate geo function. But I clearly, I don't think that's what you're thinking. But what I would be interested in asking is, how do you layer in that geo? How do you talk with a mature SEO team about, okay, now we're going to have a geo focus? What are the kind of jobs to be done, the tasks that you break out? How do you earmark certain roles for a geo focus versus an SEO focus to get to that nuance that I think we all see as the value point of these new engines?
Yeah, well, there are two things. On one hand, how much are LLMs driving to your site? What is the current revenue? What is the current traffic? Also, doing a little bit of research, audience research in those top platforms that are already driving a lot of traffic to your own website. And among your top competitors, you can use third-party tools to take a look at which are the biggest driver for traffic, not only to your own site, but to theirs, right? And go and take a look at what is your visibility in there for the top questions, the top queries that you have been historically used and useful. And we know that there's a personalization as well that is much bigger and heavier in LLMs than in traditional search. But if you do quite a few of them for the different audiences and personas and use cases, you can gauge a little bit if you already mentioned, if the visibility that you have is consistently good and above or the same level or even better than your competitors, or is it worse? Where are the citations coming? Are this web properties or platforms coming from those that you have actively optimized already, or where you have proper presence, or are this coming from platforms where you don't have any presence at all and you're not controlling or influencing at all? And depending if the answers here are positive or negative, or you're included and all of a sudden you realize that unlike the traditional SERPs, for many of these questions that are much more commercially driven, comparing you versus your competitors, the results are actually negative. You're included, but you are mentioned with bad ratings and shown in a negative light. So you start identifying, where is this coming? Or is this coming from all of these Reddit threads that were buried in the SERP, but somehow they are used as a source here. So probably I should align more with my community manager to better understand what they're already doing, and if they are taking them into account at all, or if there's any plans to do that, etc., etc. So I thinking like, let's start doing a research, an analysis, an audit, a validation, and depending on how I am shown or not, maybe I discover, and this is something interesting that happened to me not so long ago, that my hosting company was actually blocking the access of AI bots to a few of my sites. Mm-hmm. And I was like, what is going on? Why all of the information that is provided when I asked regarding this, the topic, the content of the site, like trying to force, even because when I was seeing that the information was not coming, or the share of voice that I expected was very poor, and I started to dig further, and then I realized it was because the hosting platform was blocking, right? So I had to get in touch with them to ask why. Like, unfortunately, this is something that you should be aware of. Be aware of that many hosting companies will proactively block, and you should opt out of that if you don't want to. I mean, by all means, I believe that there are reasonable scenarios for which you might not necessarily want AI bots to access to your website, but you should be aware of it, and it should be like more of an opt-in type of behavior rather than opt-out, always with the information in front and being aware of the implications and so on. In any case, I ended up opting out of that, and I realized that it happened because I had taken the steps to validate, etc. So my recommendation will be, you should definitely take the steps to validate that. And I do believe that the best professionals in marketing and in any area to take these steps to understand the criteria, the type of factors, and having access already to tools, many SEO tools already, and run trackers already provide this sort of data already, are SEOs, right? So I don't think that you should create yet another role just for this, or yet another discipline, only if you want to throw money potentially to the bin. And I don't think that is something that you want, because you already have someone and people, your agencies, your consultants already know about this, or your in-house SEO. So why not leveraging already their know-how to cover and to target this yet another platform? As I mentioned, it's not a completely new discipline, it's yet another platform. Now, if it becomes, let's say, in a few years, right, everything is evolving a lot, it's changing a lot. Imagine that in a few years, every single platform behave and has an interface that is so very different to each other, and are driving so many powerful impact to your organization in many different ways. They might even require specific specialization. And yes, at that point, maybe you might want to have, in a few years' time, like your LLMs, expert optimization, just for ChatGPT, another for AI mode, another for like we have a TikTok specialist right now, and YouTube specialist, just because of how their algorithms and characteristics differ so much from the ones from Google, for example. You might in the future, right? But right now, this is just starting, right? At the end of the day, marketing is about impact and revenue and ROI, right? So I don't see the ROI yet there, right? So leverage what you already have. If you have a good SEO, they should know about it. Our in-house agency consultant, they should be able to know about this, how to do this, and tell you if the gap is very big, if you do need to invest more, and very likely also align what is going to have impact in AI search with a lot of those tasks that have been left in the backlog in traditional search that will also drive impact very likely in traditional search.
This episode is brought to you by MoEngage and their new warehouse native CEP, which revolutionizes the way data should be seamlessly fetched, analyzed, and activated. Now you can use MoEngage Cloud Data Sync to sync your warehouse data with MoEngage and use it to segment audiences or personalize messages without any development. Just set and forget. Use MoEngage warehouse segments to create segments on your warehouse data without moving underlying events, properties, or proprietary segmentation logic, and activate them directly on MoEngage. Using warehouse data analytics, brands can also directly generate insights from their warehouse data. Your long search solution for seamless data sync, smarter segmentation, dynamic personalization, and delightful customer experiences ends here. Warehouse native CEP from MoEngage, making it easy, smart, and secure. Learn more at moengage.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Knack. I have the amazing pleasure of chatting with some of the greatest minds in marketing operations, but you'd be shocked at how many of them have the same issues when it comes to their campaign creation process. They're dealing with things like scaling, personalization, keeping assets on brand, render testing emails, working in rigid templates, and worst of all, having to hand code emails. But many of the leaders in the space are using Knack to eliminate these headaches. Knack is a no-code email and landing page creation platform that covers initial campaign requests right until the sync to your marketing automation platform. Knack improves the whole campaign creation process by bringing the building, optimization, testing, collaboration, and also translation functions all in a single spot. So you don't have to jump around and coordinate feedback between a bunch of different people or wait on developers for very simple edits. Because at the end of the day, marketing ops folks want to focus on process and efficiency. Marketers want to focus on creativity, and Knack makes sure you get both and then some. Check them out at knack.com. That's KNAK, and tell them we sent you.
I'm curious to ask you, like the SEOs listening right now, or folks that are really deep in Google or in a certain channel for SEO, do you think that without question, LLM or AI search is the next one that they 100% should be investing most of their eggs into in the next few years?
Well, it's definitely, these are definitely channels that if you see the evolution of usage is growing a lot. So they should be definitely accounted for, that you should definitely need to take into account and put them into your different platforms that you should be validating, assessing, researching to identify potential. Maybe the potential that you identify is low. Maybe the potential is big. And depending on what you identify and that research, you will need to allocate more and invest and want to invest more. But at least to validate and assess the potential, yes, 100%.
Yeah, the whole question about like assessing that potential and validating it is tricky. Like you mentioned at the top of your last answer, how much traffic is coming from LLMs, how much revenue are coming from mentions. I think that's one of the biggest question marks I see on LinkedIn with geo is, what do we even track when it comes to geo? We don't really have access to clean data sets or any type of predictive volume that SEOs are used to. So do we just go back to first principles here? Is that your advice? Like JT was just talking about in his consulting work, he's leading to more like persona, narrative-driven content in an LLM-driven environment. Like, do you think the top of funnel model even makes sense anymore? What are your thoughts there?
Yes, I do believe that it's definitely a shift with this traditional, unfortunately, a traditional SEO sort of tactic in the past that was to create and invest a lot of top of the funnel content to attract traffic. But funnily enough, this was something that was already not necessarily being very cost effective lately with AI overviews already, because this was, well, very conceptually driven, very informational type of content for which Google was already or is already giving more AI overviews because they can be easily, let's say, answered and the user will tend to be very easily satisfied if these are high level, generic sort of questions, informational needs that they can easily solve by just seeing a little bit of a summary regarding the concept, right? However, there's also the point about, well, if you want to establish authority in your field, you cannot just say, don't invest in informational content, don't invest in the content that will, on one hand, establish authority to attract citations, to establish your brand, but also this is how you become personalization resilient in LLMs. Cover the different intents through the full customer journey, targeting your different personas across use cases right from the start. But the point is like then deciding what is the type of content that actually makes sense, that is informational, but that also makes sense to create because it's very on brand. And it needs to be very on brand. It cannot be fluffy, glossary type of content, addressing generic questions that are not necessarily about your product or service or your brand, right? So think more about industry insights like research, stats, trends, case studies, thought leadership, or comparisons versus competitors or FAQs, leverage from your community that you start publishing on your site, providing more context for decision making and so on. Help centers and forums also make a lot of sense to optimize further in order to target a lot of this, what you could consider informational questions and queries at the start of the journey as well, not only post-purchase. So think about that. So this is content that doesn't only make sense just to get traffic and easy traffic at the start of the search journey, top of the funnel traffic, but also makes sense to address your clients well and to provide a good pre-sales and post-sales support as well. This is what I recommend to clients. No, you need to continue investing, but just be more mindful on what you invest. This should be on-brand content that should be helpful, even if you take SEO out of the equation, even if you take LLMs out of the equation. This is a type of content that you want to have in there because it's useful for your customers and it will make you sell more. And this is indeed the content that will then, even if there is an AI overview, or the user or the potential customers end up going to LLMs to get an answer, they will likely not be satisfied just with a simple answer. They will want to dig more and want to know the source. And because it is on brand, I will expect that they recognize you, they engage with you, and well, this is where when the visit is generated. And even if they don't generate the visit right away, now they know you. Now they know your brand. Whenever they continue researching about the products or service later on in the process, they will recognize you and very likely they will be more keen to purchase from you because they already recognize you, that you were one of the sources that provided the answers at the beginning of the journey. And this is how we need to think about it. Now, the complex thing here is the attribution and how do you manage cost effectiveness and so on. And yes, that is the challenge pretty much. But yes, 100%, we need to establish on brand comprehensive topical authority targeting the full customer journey with helpful multimodal indexable information that highlight your unique selling propositions and generally helps customers. And this is how I see it, like just eliminating top of the funnel. That's, I would say, like the least lazy approach to avoid bleeding resources, let's say. But the actual strategical way to address it is like how you continue doing it in a way that actually makes sense and is on brand.
One of my hopes out of this, and I think you're touching on it quite a bit, so I'm going to enunciate it a little bit more, is that we end up starting in the SEO world and the content marketing world, creating content that is persona driven and customer focused versus just the traditional, I don't even want to call it traditional, but too often SEO gets typecast as we go to SEMrush or Ahrefs and we find a list of keywords and then we write to those keywords. Whereas nowadays I'm finding personally in my own work is that the LLM SEO game has allowed me to get permission to talk to people that in the organization I wouldn't typically talk to. Mm-hmm. Some of my most fruitful conversations, as Phil alluded to, was talking to salespeople and just saying, what are the customers saying to you? Like, what are their pain points? What are the words that they use? And then getting into transcripts. Like, I think there's an art form in picking content that is more LLM focused, but still underneath that SEO banner, right? We've always had keyword volume 0, and we're introducing zero click into the story. But I'm curious about your perspective on how do we, as marketers, SEOs, mine content that is relevant? Like, what sources do you find working? And how do you kind of take some of those? I think some of this is experimentation. You have to experiment. You have to try something to see what comes back if your approach lands. But being aligned to the persona and the customer journey seems to make the most sense. So, curious your process there.
Yeah. So I believe that is an issue that we have had historically, right? Like thinking of SEO as a very tactic oriented channel, without applying even the same type of principles that you will apply to any other channel from a marketing standpoint. That is a reality, and is so going and looking for queries or topics to target through tools, and letting yourself only drive which to pick based on the search volume, rather than asking your customers, or at least leveraging your customer support or insights, and validating with the product or the marketing person who knows more about the pains, etc., which in many occasions were not yet documented in those tools, right? Or were so blended, and that were not necessarily accounted there yet, right? In many occasions. So that is a problem. That was a challenge that we historically had. But good SEO that actually, it's scalable, and resistance to all of these changes and evolution is the one that, yes, talks with product, talks with customer service, talks with digital PR, with social media, with branding, and make sure to target queries that actually align with the brand. So a few years back, one of my clients was a cruise line, a very famous cruise line, and one of the things that they mentioned right away from the beginning is, like, you will see in the keyword research that you do that the most popular keyword, or among the top 3 most popular keywords, there are a couple of them that are cheap cruises, and cheap cruises plus the year, things like that. It's like, we are not cheap. We don't want to go for them. It doesn't matter that the search volume is high. And this is the type of insight and information that we should think about when we do SEO, and historically, not only right now, right? Unfortunately, it's usually in agencies, the person who many times end up doing the keyword research is the intern, right? So rather than a proper sophisticated marketer who has the know-how and understanding of the product or service, or with that input, right? So of course you end up having keywords that don't necessarily make sense. They have a ton of search volume, but don't make sense with the tone of voice, with the unique selling proposition, with the brand, etc., etc. And finally, I believe that we have come to the place right now in which it makes us rethink of, does it really make sense going for all of these terms for the sake of trying to get easy, cheap traffic, straightforward traffic that we can get into. There is this platform that it was one of the biggest losers from one of the Google updates last year. I'm not going to name names, but you probably know it. And these are platforms that they had so much authority and popularity that realistically they could get away for a long time for whatever topic or content that they will publish. And it will tend to rank well, as long as if it was slightly tangentially related to their topic. So a lot of the traffic that they were getting, the top of the funnel, were realistically for very likely off topics from what they were offering, that was a little bit of more software related, and then they lost a lot of this traffic in one of these updates that Google finally ended up tweaking a little bit their signals to, well, make sure that this is on brand, that subject matter expertise actually makes a little bit of a bigger role in there. So and a lot of people said like, oh, they lost 1/4 of their traffic or something like that. But yes, I was like, yes, it's true, but take a look at which were the pages that dropped a lot. And yes, literally we're bringing 1/4 of their traffic, like literally 5 pieces for very broad terms that honestly at that scale, I wonder how many of these visits ended up converting, but we're not their core areas of expertise or core solution pages or meaningful from a business standpoint. And 100%, this is the type of content that you will end up creating without thinking on personas or unique selling proposition or your actual brand or nothing, right? And that is why 100% I believe that there has never been a better moment like today in which, like, yes, you need to be very thoughtful on what you write about to make sure that it actually makes sense, not only today, but in the future, and resist across all of this and using personas and using your your unique selling proposition and the brand values and etc makes complete sense. And this is how we should be able to prioritize beyond any metric. So you mentioned regarding the search volume of SEO tools, we can extrapolate now that with the top prompts examples that a few AI trackers provide. By all means, these are good to take as a reference, as an input, as examples of samples of what users might be asking there regarding your topic. But it is a mistake to start obsessing on the very few prompts to try to get into them just because of how personalized the answers are on one hand and how long tail they really are. So if these are even actual prompts, let's assume they are not automatically generated, they are, but imagine all of the different wordings that there are out there. Like very few scenarios, the same prompt will be asked twice. And even if it is asked twice, the answers will differ quite a bit just because of the personalization of the user context, the geolocation, previous history, behavior, etc. So rather than obsessing on specific prompts that might have X or Y value, we should think about the topics that actually make sense for us to go for, to get visibility for, independently on the wording, right? And yes, have a few prompts to assess a little bit and gauge how we are doing, but not obsessing about ranking or being included or being showcased in specific, in a few specific one of them. Yeah.
You hit on so much, like the idea. I'm sure there's some SEOs who have trauma of being asked what keyword is ranking where at any given moment. But I think what you hit on is the maturity of the SEOs is push back and say, the content we create should be aligned with all of our marketing efforts. It should be positioned the same way. What I find interesting, just to kind of take another point that you were talking about, was this idea of LLM prompts and data. I built myself like a little LLM analysis tool back in February of this year. For a hot second, I thought, oh, maybe this would be useful publicly, but I have all kinds of reasons why I didn't do that. But what I found most interesting was just like the idea of getting into these prompts. Like there's a moment in time when you're like, I know the first 20 prompts I want, but what about the next 100 prompts or the next 1,000? And I've long said this for content marketing, but context is king, not content. And I think if you understand the user's context, then you have the ability to actually connect in with them and then earn that positioning opportunity in terms of content. One of the things I noticed working with my own clients is this prompt obsession. We want to know what prompts should we track and what prompts really matter. But I think that there's two ways to look at this. As you mentioned, like the prompt trackers, they provide us a layer of good data, and I think we should pay attention to that data. But then there's that other intuitive sense that we all have. I use Whisper, which is like a voice to text app, and I talk to ChatGPT or Claude all the time. My prompts never follow a structure, and there's all kinds of weirdness in them, but I get good recommendations. I bought many products off of them. How do you see us getting into a mature state with prompting, that we're working with stakeholders outside of SEO? Because this is sometimes our challenge, right? Is translating the keyword volume into, well, actually, this isn't tactics, this is strategy. How do you approach that? How do you approach like this idea of building a topical map, for instance, around prompts that might be used by customers and LLMs?
So there are now tools that thankfully provide more context around that, and they aggregate prompts per topic. So there's definitely that. I am happy to see that. So and what I think about is topics rather than prompt, and think about which are the different topics and brands names, in case I am a retailer, for example, and I provide and I sell quite a few product lines and brands like that are important for me, and I want to be known for, right? And I go to these tools. Thankfully, for example, there are a few tools that you enter the topic or the term, and it will provide which are the top brands and the top topics, and then of course a very long tail list of prompts examples that they are taking into account. But I start gauging that rather than the generic visibility for whatever. No, visibility within these contexts of these topics. So an example, if I have a sports retailer, I want to see what is my visibility for each of the top product lines that I sell. So what is my visibility for women's sneakers or men's jackets or children golf swag, things like that, right? So I will start validating my visibility of my brand versus my competitors, and which are my competitors and how they are being cited and which are their citations and so on, and take it from there. So this is what I will do. I won't even obsess about brand, but I will start checking on the topic and my share of voice and my visibility and the sentiment of my brand versus my competitors for them. Then, of course, what I will tend to do to track over time is to take quite a few of those prompts that I see are being shown for each one of those topics as a reference, and start tracking them to see how it shifts over time. But within that context, right? Understanding that to better understand how it evolves over time, but not to obsess about, I need to be included in these ones because otherwise it means that I fail. No, my objective is to track the evolution over time within this particular context and topic and area of expertise versus these other brands, or how many times also my brands are mentioned versus and the sentiment of the brand versus these other brands for this particular subject or area, rather than trying to, let's say, going for specific prompts that are it's too granular. They are too granular on one hand, or then just trying to compare brands in a generic way. So if an example, right, like there are brands like Adidas, for example, they provide not only shoes, but also all type of sportswear, right? So, and if you only compete on shoes, I mean, you only provide shoes, why do you want to gauge yourself for everything Adidas? No, you want to gauge or assess yourself for only the sneakers particular vertical versus Adidas, right? And that is how I start assessing and configuring it. Thankfully, there are more and more tools out there that allows you to do that rather than starting from prompts.
So one thing that we haven't asked yet, but you've hinted at, and I've seen you publicly talk about, was the idea of getting a ChatGPT search console or a Claude search console, Perplexity search console. You know, we also talked about just like the transparency of Google. You know, SEOs have been reverse engineering the algorithm since the birth of it. Do you have hopes that we will see these types of consoles come out for these LLMs that will be more transparent in this future, or do you think we'll probably still follow the same direction? What is your read on it?
I believe that they will come, but once that the market is more settled and they are able to show more proof of their value. I believe that they are not there yet because maybe they are not referring necessarily that much of a traffic yet, and the traffic is staying within them. I don't know, maybe, possibly. Maybe that traffic won't make them look as good, right? And we know that there are a lot of this, not only debates, but even trials in the US and suits already going on, and it's not in their benefit. But I think that eventually they should, especially if these channels, whenever these channels start selling ads consistently across these new surfaces, that should be like the tipping point, like the actually ends up making the difference, I believe, because they will need to give more data for that, and potentially that is how we are going to get access. Also, with ChatGPT, with the shopping integration, I expect that they provide more in terms of metrics and visibility and performance, at least of those players that integrate, right? So yes, I think that it is a matter of time, but it should come.
We got two last questions for you, Aleyda. This has been super fun. I wanted to end on this like positive note about the space. There's a lot of folks that hope that, you know, advanced AI search is finally going to reward genuinely insightful expert content over the kind of generic SEO driven listicles that we kind of talked about that have dominated a lot of the past. In other words, like a boutique blog with not a lot of traffic, but deep expertise could outrank high volume content mills if the content truly educates or solves a problem. Do you share this optimism that LLM powered search could elevate quality over quantity? What signs, if any, have you seen that AI search might actually rank or recommend content differently than
this is already happening. That is already happening.
Nice.
I mean, I am seeing those players that you see around saying, oh, all of a sudden, my brand, my startup started to get cited in ChatGPT, and it is now my biggest traffic driver, and I have made 90% of my clients or my customers from it in the last 6 months. Is because these are startups that were not really investing much or hadn't been able to do much in SEO because they were just starting a year ago or a year and a half ago, and they had already a little bit of community going on and mentions in YouTube and mention in social platforms, etc. But they didn't have powerful backlinks yet from authoritative sources. They didn't have a proper taxonomy targeting to all of the different queries that were commercially relevant for them, for which they needed landing pages or PLPs, PDPs, or whatever that were properly structured and optimized with good internal linking, etc., and they didn't get. But then all of a sudden they started to get all of these leads because they were positively cited in this very positive light for this very hot topic in LLMs.
Very cool.
Of course, if they had been players that they would have been doing already SEO for 5 years ago, the share of these mentions will have been like potentially 5% of their revenue or customers, because they are quite new. They're already seeing the fruits of the little mentions, the little visibility, because they had been doing like good actual product marketing for their customer base, and that ended up paying off like this. So I think that we have already seen that, and
Nice.
I expect that this grows over time. That the it's not a zero-sum game as
Right.
well, because we know that behavior is shifting, and there are also new searches, new topics, new hot trends going on all the time. So yeah, this only continue to grow over time.
I love it. Aleyda, last question for you. You're an SEO consultant, obviously frequent speaker, avid traveler, the SEO FOMO author for the newsletter. You're also a founder and a meetup organizer. You're also a paddle tennis player, you were telling us before we started recording. You got a ton of stuff going on in your life. One question we ask everyone on the show is, how do you decide what deserves your energy at any given moment? And what's your personal system for staying aligned with what actually makes you happy?
Well, I believe that it all has to do with independence and purpose, right? So what gives me independent, not only well, monetary or financial, or what actually matters more for me to be able to do what I like to do. And I really like to do SEO. I really like to talk with customers. That is why I don't have like the big agency or huge agency, but boutique consultancy, because I still in touch with client and advise them. So I try to design my work and prioritize my projects accordingly. I enjoy talking with people and interacting with people in the community. And I work remotely, so I have a lot of flexibility also to well, the events that I go and I engage with, et cetera, et cetera. And the same a little bit with sports, right? Historically, I haven't been the most sporty person in the world, but I understand and I know that it's important to keep fit, to be healthy as well, right? So I had to pick activities that align a little bit with my preferences and I wouldn't get bored at. Like, for example, going to the gym for me is not necessarily incentivizing. So I jump rope at home, which is like very complete sort of exercise that I can do anywhere. And then with paddle is a very social sport as well. It helps a little bit also with to keep yourself engaged with others in the community, and it's super fun as well. So I try to blend a little bit my lifestyle and what I enjoy and what has impact, and is aligned with my goals and preferences, not only business and professional wise, but also at a personal space.
I love it, Aleyda. Thank you so much for sharing that. Thanks so much for your time today. Got a few minutes left to plug some stuff if you want. We're going to share links to the newsletter, some of the meetups that are coming up for you, but this episode is dropping early in 2026, so feel free to plug whatever you want.
Oh, thank you very much for the opportunity. I have a few resources that I have created for free that I believe that can be quite helpful for all of those who want to keep up with AI search. I have learningaisearch.com, which is a completely free website where I aggregate reliable resources to learn or to execute some of the top activities in AI search. It's like a little bit the counterpart of learningseo.io that I created like a few years ago. So on one hand, learningaisearch.com. On the other hand, if you want to keep up with the latest in AI search as well as SEO, I have SEOFOMO.co. This is my main newsletter, almost 40K subscribers, which I expect to reach in a couple of weeks already. And then I have AImarketers.com, which is my other newsletter as well, which I cover everything like the top news, top trends in AI marketing as well. That might be also useful and relevant for you to check out, both completely free, of course. And yeah, I try to do my best to only pick what is actually reliable and newsworthy.
Awesome. I was going to list all of those except AImarketers.com. That's a new one for me, so I will be checking that out for sure. Thank you so much for everything you do for this space, Aleyda. Really appreciate your time today. This is super fun.
Thank you for the opportunity.